Yes, thank you, Dan, for inviting me, and thanks to Roger and all the other speakers for organizing such a beautiful conference. My name is Tufan Guven. I told you maybe a little bit about myself yesterday. I'll go over again. My background is in finance and hedge fund management, and I've been studying and researching the fractal field physics for around 10 years. I'm also a practitioner of biophoton therapy, and we work with the photonic emissions of the cells. And so today I will be speaking about universal frequency cascade that Dan has been talking about, and that is being used in multiple technologies like TeraPhi and the Flaming Mind applications. So I'll try to make the science a little simpler and easier for you. And then we'll go on to charge embed-ability, and then the implosion science in Islamic symbolism.
I think that's a wonderful connection. I see the implosion in the symbolism.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go through some basic steps. So I'm sure each one of you know what golden ratio is, but just to go over it, golden ratio can be applied to multiple areas like lengths, distances, time. Now I'm going to give some examples on the length to make it easier. Let's say we have 1 unit of length and we want to divide it from the golden section or golden ratio point, which is 0.618, and then we get the result of two different lengths, B and C. So A to B, or 1 over 0.618, is 1.618, meaning the golden ratio. And B to C, meaning 0.618 over 0.382, is also 1.618, the golden ratio. So both ratios, A to B and B to C, is golden ratio. They are the same, meaning they have a harmony within each other. Another example is from an octave ratio. If we divide this 1 unit from the exact middle point from 0.5, then we get B and C. Now, A to B, 1 over 0.5 is 2. And B to C is 1. So we have 2 and 1, different ratios. So we cannot say that there is harmony between those two ratios. So that's why by cutting it through the golden section, we have a harmony within the pieces that come along. So the small one can also represent the bigger one in ratio, and the bigger one can represent the small one. So we see these, the science of golden ratio mostly came out during the Renaissance period through some famous artists, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and we also see them in some buildings like religious structures, churches, temples. I was able to measure some of the ratios, and it's interesting to see that almost all of the sacred spaces were designed specifically based on that ratio. And we can see them in different parts. This is the Matthias Church in Budapest. I measured these with the harmonizer. We'll talk more about why they were using that. Another point is the exponents of golden ratio, where we see multiples of ratio in a system. We know that golden ratio both contains arithmetic and geometric progression. And golden ratio is the only ratio in the universe of mathematics which contains both arithmetic and geometric progression, meaning it can add and multiply constructively. So golden ratio is the only ratio that allows charge distribution efficiency and constructive wave interference because of that simple reason. and some practical examples. Where do we see that? We see it on our body, multiples of golden ratio. Like our fingers, our bones, on the fingers, I'll show you simply. The small bone to the exterior one is exact golden ratio, and this one to this one is golden ratio, this one to this one is golden ratio. You can look at it like that. This one to this one, and let me arrange it. This one. So we can see the exponents of golden ratio also on our bodies in different parts. On the brainwaves, and Dan Winter and Patrick both developed this nice application, flamingmind.com, and we can see the exponents of golden ratio among the beta, alpha, delta, theta frequencies of our brains, especially when we are in a meditative states towards a bliss experience. Our brainwaves arrange themselves based on golden ratio. And we see that in DNA, the braiding.
Beautiful slide.
Thank you. And also in sacred spaces as well, we see the exponents of golden ratio. So this is the Saints Peter and Paul Church in Krakow. And you can see that this church is built based on the exponents of golden ratio. There aren't only two places that show golden ratio, but there are multiple places. This is the front view of the church. So, as I said, there's a specific reason why they chose to build sacred spaces based on the exponents of golden ratio, and we'll talk more about that. But simply to amplify the intention, the prayer, and the work that is being done there.
Amplify and implode.
Yes. Thank you. And exponents of golden ratio is also found in the universe. So this is the cover of the Nature magazine. And is this the shape of the universe? Yes. A dodecahedron is a perfect fractal shape. We know that dodeca and icosa they give each other through the stellated forms. So that form itself has the exponents of golden ratio itself. So meaning that the universe has the exponents of golden ratio. So how did they understand that? They did a temperature mapping of the universe, and they applied different 3D models on the map and tried to see which one fits perfectly. And only dodecahedron fitted the temperature mapping perfectly.
And the symmetry of masses, I think, is what.
Yeah, so this is a nice expression of a fractal universe. And thanks to Dan, formulated this physics in the waves form. And on this slide, we see that, so this is the universal frequency cascade. And what Dan did was, he started from the Planck distance point, which is the smallest scale that you can get. It's like the fabric of space and time. That's the space where you cannot divide it into two. This is the smallest part. And he continued multiplying it with only the golden ratio, meaning the exponents of golden ratio. And he reached to specific wavelengths. So each wavelength is multiplied with golden ratio. So the next wavelength is the golden ratio exponent of that, and the next one is the golden ratio exponent of that. That's how it goes. And he reaches to very important molecularly metabolistic frequencies and heavenly rotations and periods, like galactic year, precession of the equinox, Venus-Earth year, and 3 exact hydrogen radii, ADP, ATP, the exact 2 photosynthesis frequencies, Schumann period, and the low frequency heart rate, Mayer wave block. So we'll get back to this slide again, but I would like to focus on the 2 important forces in the universe, centrifugal and centripetal forces. So we see that on the left side, the field effect, the charge is trying to move outwards, like in the explosion. And on the right side, we see the implosion where the charge tries to come to the center, an implosive field. Where do we see these fields in the universe? In black holes, in whirlpools, and we know it from science that one of the functions of the qualities of the black hole is transduction of energy, taking energy from one dimension, transferring it to the other. Like we also see that in our bodies. Glenn Ryan very nicely put it in his articles that our human bodies consist of multiple layers of biofields, like a torus around us. It's like a plasma field. And the function of the torus, or especially the catenoid, the place inside, the vortex, has the function of transduction of energy from higher dimensions to biologically usable electromagnetic energy.
We'll be talking a lot about what it means to go to the next dimension in our advanced lecture as well,
Yeah.
so it's a good start. It's a superposed rotation to spin.
Right. And we went over the exponents of golden ratio. Arithmetic and geometric progression means you get the two number multiplied together. You add one number to the other, you get the second one. It's continuous like that. And you multiply any number with golden ratio, which is 1.618, and you get the next number. This is both having arithmetic and geometric progression together. And because golden ratio is the only ratio which allows this adding and multiplying constructively, it's the only ratio that allows constructive wave interference. And what I mean by that is, in an implosive field, if the waves arrange themselves based on golden ratio, if they meet at this specific meeting points based on golden ratio, then we get this constructive wave interference in the vortex form.
And implosion.
Yes, like this. And in the physics of waves, a transverse wave becomes longitudinal or compressional scalar at the end of this center, at the end of the tip, because the rotational charge travel translates itself to inertia, and it goes faster and faster, and at the end of the tip, it becomes longitudinal. Then we'll talk about more about this.
It's specifically at the Planck threshold that the translation occurs from the transverse to longitudinal, and that's the subject of this afternoon, so it's very appropriate.
Yeah. So still I'm trying to focus on the vortex geometry. It's very instructive in understanding the science. And in mathematics, we can apply that on a star. We know that the star has perfect golden ratio. This is why this is one of the most sacred esoteric symbolisms in history. If you draw a star in the pentagon here and draw another star in the smaller pentagon, you can create the perfect constructive wave interference, because this model consists of multiple golden ratios. So for example, this one is golden ratio to this one to this one, this one to this one, and this one to this one. So it goes towards the center perfectly, non-destructively. And we can visually apply or put this whirlpool right at the center of this model, just to make it easier to visualize it. And as we said, because it creates constructive wave interference, this is a perfect point for charge implosion, which supports the life force, which gives out a bioactive field. That's why in each one of these specific points, there is perfect charge implosion based on this science. It's fractal and it progresses with golden ratio. So this is just a simple representation of that universal frequency cascade. It doesn't exactly represent, but this is what I found to explain it. As I said, imagine those specific meeting points, which are the perfect compressional points, which create this field effect, this implosive field effect. And we can put these vortices in those areas, these are the perfect points which support life force and create the good stuff. And put those vortices, before that, just to remind you the famous quote from Tesla, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And this is what we are doing right now. We are thinking in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And from that, I want to remind the famous quote from Dan Winter: perfect compression creates perfect charge distribution. And we know how and why this perfect compressional fields occur at those specific golden ratio meeting points of the waves. And yeah, we can take those whirlpools and put it on those specific places. And for those fields to happen, it has to be arranged by only golden ratio. So we know that a fractal field is a mathematical geometrical set that exhibits a repeating and self-similar pattern displayed at every scale. And so here we can see that effect. So it's fractal because it repeats itself and it is self-similar. And the bottom line is a fractal field based on golden ratio breeds charge, becomes a bioactive field. I think it doesn't get more simpler than this.
Thank you for elegantly summarizing.
So now I want to talk about the charge embed-ability, starting from the tablet of Shamash. So we know that the tablet of Shamash has golden ratio proportions inside. This was studied with multiple researchers. This is not something new. And because of that quality, it contains multiple golden ratio rectangles in it. But the interesting thing that I discovered with the help of Dan Winter and John Michel's formulas, the tablet of Shamash fits into this fractal frequency cascade very nicely. So the measurements in black are actual measurements in the British Museum, and the measurements in green are based on the sacred food charge resonant phase conjugate, which are explained first by John Michel's and later by Dan Winter's equations independently. So there is a very slight difference between those measurements, and maybe we can explain that by the depreciation of the tablet over time. But I would like you to think why the Anunnakis or the Sumerian gods chose to create those tablets based on the fractal universal frequency cascade. There is a reason for that. And I think they did that because those specific dimensions, as we went over Dan's chart, are charge implosive, and it automatically amplifies the intention, the philosophy embedded on the stone. And I think they were right on doing the dimensions.
The stone itself is a waveguide electrically, and Tufan did beautiful work, because I never conceived of analyzing that stone, but it's beautiful, Tufan.
Yes.
I think it'd be good just to mention that you see on the right how the all the ancient sacred units are related in a very simple geometric cascade.
Right.
Right, the Royal Cubic, Palestinian, Roman pace, megalithic, a very simple geometric cascade, and later, which is John Michel's work, to be clear. But later we showed that even included the South American pyramids. But the new information there was that whole sequence was based on the English foot. And my little contribution there was to discover that the English foot was bang on the equation. So to be sacred, you fit into charge implosion, and that's why you call it sacred unit.
And I took that formula and just multiplied it with golden ratio and reached the specific distances, which are perfectly.
That's right. Tufan added that. That brings us ancient religion again. Thank you, Tufan.
You're welcome. So this was the main inspiration for me to create this golden ratio ruler caliper, the harmonizer. This is a small ad. So this is the world's first ever charge embedding golden ratio ruler caliper harmonizer. There have been many different golden ratio rulers before. They were successfully measuring the golden ratio. But this one, the difference of this one is that this fits perfectly to the universal frequency cascade by the dimensions of it, approved by Dan Winter. So yeah, you can find them here if you want to.
So not only is the ratio right, the scale is right. When you have scale and ratio right, then you implode and enter the sacred.
Thank you. And the universe and the nature uses specific ways for charge distribution efficiency. And specifically, nature uses the Fibonacci sequence, as many of you know. So there's a reason why the nature uses Fibonacci sequence, because the nature works with the whole numbers. If a tree wants to give a fruit, it cannot give 0.618 fruit. It can either give 1 or not. So it has to use the whole numbers. And yeah, when you add two numbers each other, you get the next one. And when you start dividing them to each other, like 1 over 1 is 1, 2 over 1, 2, 3 over 2, 1.5. As you divide them to each other, it tries to perfect itself on a line. And that specific line is going towards the perfect golden ratio. It's like this vortex field that we've been talking about. So only golden ratio allows this.
And the first pictures they ever showed of Fibonacci progression, they always showed it was the unfurling of a leaf. And so the leaves unpack in such a way to share the light. And they call that, oh yes, I'm sorry, excuse me. That's maximum, they call it maximum exposure, minimum superposition, which is nature discovering the perfect way to share.
Yeah.
In that case, the light, but to share anything.
Phyllotaxis.
I jumped your slide.
No, that's fine, that's fine. I can go over. And yeah, we see the Fibonacci sequence on the spiraling algorithms in the on this one, there are 34 slides, 34 spirals to one direction and 21 spirals to the other, which is within the Fibonacci sequence. And on a broccoli, we see 13 spirals to one direction, 8 spirals to the other within the Fibonacci sequence. And on a pine cone, we see 13 spirals again to one direction, 8 spirals to the other. And I think that pine cone is a nice way of representing this ancient science. Is they were using it, we can call it negantropic charge collapse, because this is the way nature creates energy from the ether, or gravity from the ether.
It's so beautiful. I'll stop interrupting.
Sure.
It's so beautiful in the Steiner work when they measured that over the year, the tree opens and closes the pine cone depending on how much energy it needs. So it's a little charge imploder capacitor, and the tree is breathing that open and floating depending on how much battery power it needs. And it's all measured and graphed in the anthroposophic fields of form, vortex of life, Lawrence Edwards.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, pine cone is a nice symbolism to also talk about phase conjugation, pine cones kissing noses, and it has been measured in the optic physics that when you point two lasers to each other, it is specific phase conjugate material, a mirror, that the waves tend to self-organize and become negantropic and create order from disorder. Yeah.
We're going to talk a lot about phase conjugate mirrors, so this is a graph to start thinking about. Yes.
Yeah, because
John D. and Kelly and all
yeah,
the fun stuff.
when there's a specific symmetry operation in a phase conjugation, there's perfect compression as creating perfect charge distribution, and the waves tend to self-organize themselves and create this negantropic implosive field. And it's also measured first time in history that time reversal is possible in physics, in optic physics.
I want to say, Tufan does this lecture better than I do.
Yes. So we've been talking about this vortex field, like this whirlpool, and our theme of this morning's conference, let's say, the center point or going to the center. And when we talk about the Platonic solids, I would like to visualize these vortices that are represented by each phase angles of these Platonic solids. So when we I'm sure all of you know what Platonic solids are. The main quality of them are that all their faces, their corners, their sides are equal to each other within the system. And looking at the cube and the dodecahedron, so we see the implosive charge fields starting from the face going towards the center in a perfect symmetrical way. And when the matter from the ether organize themselves like this, then it creates gravity as we see it in the atoms, in the molecular arrangements.
And just to say, in phase conjugate optics, you want to map of where you have to place the lasers to phase conjugate.
Yeah,
the left-hand picture. That's it. Simple.
Yeah, this is a representation of this cube phase conjugation as they have been using on the optic physics. So as we said, waves organize each other based on the golden proportion, golden progression. Yeah, we see it in the nucleus of the atoms. In chemist Moon's model of the nucleus, we see a nesting of the 4 of the 5 Platonic solids, similar to that conceived by Johannes Kepler to describe the solar system. And we can also divide the atomic table into 4 based on their electron shells arrangements to the specific Platonic solids.
So both the nucleus and the electron cells are particularly specifically a nest, a Platonic nest, like Star Mother. And their self-similarity between the outside and the inside is profoundly fractal. And that's what we proved by equations.
All right.
That's Moon's work, chemist at the University of Chicago. Wonderful.
And we see those symmetry operations in quasicrystals very clearly. This is the aluminum, palladium, manganese, I guess. And these are the different electron diffraction patterns where we can see different symmetry operations and different angles.
X-ray diffraction patterns like that is how they figured out DNA was a helix.
Right.
Don't have a helix.
And as you can see here, we can apply multiple forms, multiple Platonic solids, multiple geometries on these electron diffraction patterns. On the left, we see the hex view. There's a star tetrahedron, a cube, octahedron, another cube or square, icosahedron, dodecahedron, applied perfectly on these diffraction patterns. And as we said, this charge implosive field it can be is applied in the molecular level, and actually the reason why the electrons arrange themselves in such positions are to allow the charge implosive field to happen, so that there is geometry in the center that holds the nucleus, the neutrons and protons together.
And you wrap that dodeca in a golden ratio slinky helix, and you have DNA.
Yep. Yeah, as I said, we can apply different geometrical patterns, 6-pointed pattern, 8-pointed, 10-pointed. And we see great similarities in the Islamic geometry, which is a great way of representing it artistically. And you can see here different geometries that were used in Islamic tradition that fit perfectly this charge implosive symmetry operations. So were they trying to explain something about the center point?
And call that sacred?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the symmetry axis in hex view. we can apply different forms of symmetry axis in a hex view. As you can see here, this is all the same electron diffraction pattern based on the hex view, and we can put different forms on it. Okay? The quality thing that they share is that there is this symmetry axis in hex view. We can call it 3 axes of spin symmetry or 6 axes of spin symmetry from 2-dimensional viewpoint. So I'm going to show you 3 different examples from the same Platonic solids, actually specifically the dodecahedron. And just to remind you that a dodecahedron is a 3D model, but what we will be seeing will be the 2-dimensional shadow effect of the dodecahedron. So we will see 2-dimensional spin symmetries of the 3-dimensional geometry. So we'll start with the first one. So this is the Star Summer kit, which is a perfect fractal field. It's also available on the table. It's also available on fractalfield.com, geometricmodels.com. And these 2 pictures are the same. So this is a bit simpler. So I'll continue with this one. So I'm going to count the faces to show you the axis of spin symmetries. So I'll just sit here. 1, 2, and 3. So we can see the 3 axes of spin symmetry. And 4, 5, and 6. All right? So there's a very clear 6 symmetry axis of dodecaicosa.
We call it incubation, the hex view. And if you just slight tilt 32 degrees.
Yeah. And on the next one, I'm going to show you another example. Oh, we can also, this is another nice example of the same example, how waves arrange themselves on this 6 symmetry axis. Remember the vortices that we were talking about? Okay, second one. This is the second example that we will go through. We will count the faces again. And don't forget that we are still talking about the 2-dimensional shadow fields. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we have a perfect cross symmetry.
Would you mind, just go back to that slide from the color, fractal color, just back, sorry. But just the point, when we first made that, no, to the one before.
This one?
No, the color, origin of color, back.
Or
sorry, backwards? Yeah, now, when we first made that slide, we were trying to prove why there are 3 pairs of primary colors, because the photon is a toroid donut and casts the shadow by conjugating, which causes the physics of the origin of color. That's how we started it. We have a lot more material on that, but just to say where that is.
Thank you. No, that's so perfect fine.
Apologies.
No problem. Yeah, we are counting it. 1, 2, 3, 4 symmetry axis, octave symmetries. Also, there is an additional 4 axes more here, because there are also faces on this side, that there again. So that gives us a hex view again embedded on a cross view, both having octave symmetries. All right? So we will move on to the third example. So this is golden ratio in axis of symmetry. And again, this is the same dodecahedron that we were working on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 faces. Of course, there are 2 more on this side, on the exact opposite, which is going through this face. And we see this 10 axis of symmetries here, which is also the cross-section view of a DNA. And we know that the DNA has perfect golden ratio in many of its dimensions. This is a way to create its electrical abilities. So we went over those 3 different examples. So the one on the left has octave ratio, and the one on the right has golden ratio. It's the same model, it's the same 3D object view from the 2D dimensions. So I'm going to ask you a question now, and who gives the right answer, I'll give a small present. But I'm asking this to the participants and not to the speakers, because most probably the speakers know the answer. So you need a specific operation to take this model and make it perfect golden ratio symmetry. And what is that specific operation that you need? Okay. I'm going to make it easier. Tell me.
The exponents?
Okay. There's something more. You need to do something in your head, in your mind.
Perspective.
Second?
A perspective change?
More specifically?
I think it's turned. Like the view is
Point of view?
a different point of view.
Yes. You have to turn it.
Yeah.
It's a very close answer. How much? Second? Who said it?
I did. 32 degrees.
Yeah. Right. So you have to rotate it specifically 32 degrees, but you started the answer, so I'm going to give this set of coasters which have Islamic patterns on it.
Wow,
there you go.
thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for the continuation of the answer. Yes. So you need to do a 32-degree rotation in your mind to get it into perfect golden ratio phase angle. And when you rotate that, to make it easier you to visualize it, the bottom face becomes the middle face here, and those 2 faces goes up. But of course, from the perspective, you can change it to the side, towards up, towards down, but just to show you. So that specific tilt angle is the exact 32 degrees tilt angle that you need to, you can create it in your mind. You can visualize it.
Do you have the slide from that? Was Hancock or Ball said that was the chin angle of the Sphinx?
Yeah.
32 degrees.
I don't have that slide.
Oh, good thing I didn't. Okay.
Right, thank
There's
you.
a reason why the chin angle of the Sphinx. That's how he's looking up. And even in the tetrahedral fire breath from Drunvalo, when you go from the hex view and you go out of the pent view, and literally triggers a bliss response, 32 degree tilt, chin angle of Sphinx.
Yeah, this was the main discussion point about the flower of life
Exactly.
symbolism. All right.
They didn't finish hex to pent. You have to finish with the pent.
So yeah, we move it from octave ratio to golden ratio,
Exactly.
and you know why we do that. We talked about it.
From incubation on the octave side, which is charge isolation, which can be useful, nature uses hex to isolate charge usefully, and nature uses pent to implode and distribute charge. They have different functions, and in architecture, that's profound meaning.
Oops. Right. Coming back to the evolution of Islamic geometrical patterns. So we see 6-pointed, 8-pointed, 10-pointed patterns, stars. There's a very nice report that was done in the University of Technology in Malaysia. So on this chart, on the left, on this picture, it shows the evolution of these patterns. The first 3 in the group belongs to the Abbasi Caliphate, starting with the 800s, this part. And that part in the middle was developed during the Seljuks. And the last three part was developed during the Ottomans, more complex mathematical forms. So I'm going to zoom in to these parts to show you. Yeah, the first three developed by the Abbasids. You can see that simple, basic geometries patterns, and that it gets more advanced by time. This is the second phase in the Seljuks period, and with the Ottomans it gets more complex mathematically.
Could you say those names again, the three phases?
Sure.
The Seljuk?
So this is the Abbasi Caliphate period, starting from 750 until 1250.
What's the word, Abbasic?
Abbasi Caliphate.
Ah, yes, okay. It's interesting history here, yes.
Yes.
So they evolved like beautifully in the culture.
Right. And then this middle part belongs to the Seljuks and Fatimids. Fatimids.
Yes, okay, that's familiar.
And then the last part touches the Ottoman period, starting from 1300 till 1800s.
So when we go to our section about how the Kava stone became the philosopher's stone projected powder, and the mad caliph learned how to grind up that to do the alchemy, we're going to refer to this history. So it's coming later in the day. And with Paul.
Yeah, and so with this understanding and observation of the complexity of the geometry shows the consciousness in evolution.
Right.
So the more complex of the geometry that we can conceive shows our evolution consciousness.
Good point. Well said. Well said.
I'm going to give an example from the first pattern from the Abbas Caliphate. This is the Great Mosque of Kairouan in Tunisia, still there in today. And you can see those geometries which we showed, and here at the bottom, you can still see them today. I'm not going to go each one of them. We don't have enough time for that. But as you can see, all the geometries, all the symbols revolve around the center point. That's very instructive in understanding gravity, negentropy, life force, charge implosion. So there are different ways of doing that artistically. And we can see a variety of geometries. In this one, this is the Nasir al-Mulk Mosque in Iran. We can see both golden ratio based symbols and octave based symbolisms everywhere.
Beautiful.
And we went over these pictures on our Fractal U class before.
Just gorgeous.
Thank you.
Really have the feeling of the sacred.
Yeah. So these are some of the nice depictions, a compilation of different symmetries. And yeah, as we said, the commonality, the common point among these geometries is that, for me, they all have a center point. And it was very important in the Islamic tradition, especially on the esoteric mystic part in Sufism as well, that finding the center point is crucial. The center point in yourself is also the center point of the universe because it's fractal, obviously. And so these are different expressions of finding the center point in Islamic tradition. Because while the personality representation or the personality drawing was forbidden in Islamic symbolism because it didn't really reflect the true quality of the universe, it was the symmetry operation of waves, scientifically, technically. But yeah, I think that this center point is very instructive in understanding all the important sciences that is under the the fundamentals of the principles, the qualities of our life.
And briefly, how this could heal religion wars.
Yes.
Because if they see the map to the sacred was profoundly in their tradition, the same way it was in the West, they're both aiming for the same map to the sacred, suddenly we don't need any more wars because the sacred is a universal wave mechanic principle.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, center points. We see it also in the plasma fields, which has this toroidal donut shape. And I think that we all are literally residing at the center point. We are always at the center. And whatever we comprehend, we see, is always like this. The future comes back to us, and at the back, we leave the past. And what spirals back to you is your karma. From a
Think
golden...
of this later when we define time as simply rotational.
Yeah,
Think of that.
right. So the torus field, I think, is quite instructive in understanding the science here. Some other examples from Islamic symbolism. This is a new one that was recently built in Turkey. So this is a famous report that was done in Brandeis University. So they were measuring and observing the qualities of the neurons and then comparing it with the qualities of the universe. These are the connections of the superclusters. And they realized that the qualities of the neurons and the superclusters are very much like each other. Okay, they share the same qualities. So they didn't know whether this was a coincidence or not. So multiple researches were done after that, and they all came to the same conclusion that the function of the universe and function of the neurons, they work perfectly similarly.
It's like a Tesla when he figured out the perfect spark gap was a model for everything.
So from that point, we can ask this question: is the universe part of a larger mind? And this has been depicted in multiple esoteric and mystic traditions. In Sufism, we see this unity of being concept, which encourages people to look for God inside oneself and perceive the whole universe, including oneself, as the reflection of God, what we have been talking about. Famous quote from Rumi: the purpose of the mind is to see the divine essence and reach its unity. And Yunus Emre says, knowledge means to know yourself. So what happens when we start learning or knowing ourselves? Do we get the information of the universe? Why not? And we know that in Hermetism, there's this famous depiction of as above, so below, which perfectly tells the fractal nature of the universe.
Hermes is the caduceus, his phase conjugate.
Yeah.
We represent that movement. Carry on, Hermes.
So we talked about symmetry operations and different angles, octave and golden ratio frequencies. Let's go over two more examples. So we see again a hex view on the left and a golden ratio symmetry on the right. Just to make it easier. This is how it is seen from our previous example. And we can put them, embed them on the symmetries here. So this is another electron diffraction pattern of aluminum manganese. And we can see, as we went over specific Islamic symbolism, fit perfectly on these electron patterns. And as we said, this is a very nice way of describing, putting it artistically in the temples, in the sacred spaces, mosques. And what this truly represents, for me at least, is this perfect charge implosive field that goes towards the center. So I think it's always about the center point that's the most crucial that we have been talking about, this negantropic field, bioactive field. And also our visual experience, when we focus on a specific point, we are always at the center. But we cannot focus a place on the side. Wherever you change your eye, you're always at the center point. So your consciousness is always at the center. Like always being at the center, as I said. You cannot be on the side. You are always at the center. And the universe also arranged by perfect golden ratio, charge implosion. How are we with time?
5 minutes.
You've got approximately 10 minutes.
Okay. So yeah, this is the fractal depiction of the universe.
Go back to that fractal magazine. Yeah, just when we talk about how fractality causes gravity, think of this. That one magazine, New Science, concludes the universe is fractal, the other concludes it's dodeca, and neither one realizes the dodecahedron is the perfection of fractality because it's perfected golden ratio. And neither magazine knows that's how gravity is stabilized. I mean, there's a detail.
Right.
They're getting
So some examples from the nature. This is a one-cell plankton which has survived the mass extinction event a million years ago. That very much reminds me of what Dan says about what happens after a good fight in an Irish pub.
Any Irish people here want to do that metaphor? Yeah, after a good fight in the Irish pub, you say sorted, and the compression does the sorting.
So it can survive the mass extinction level with the
right.
specific geometry.
Whatever survives compression has been proved pure.
All right.
Irish pubs are where they do that work.
This is another example from Science News cover. It shows the superatoms. The superatoms molecularly arranged by dodeca-icosa symmetries, fractal, based on golden ratio, which gives them the qualities like zero electrical resistance and superconductivity.
Exactly. It's been modeled that way, right?
Yeah.
In the DNA helix, because it's a ratchet dodeca, we now know why it gets superconductive when you zap it with amperage, like lightning at the near-death experience. And then you touch everyone, and you're a superconductor. Daniel Brinkley's whole book on near-death experience. That's the physics.
So when you are molecularly arranged by golden ratio, you automatically amplify your qualities. And in our thinking, when we arrange our brain waves, meaning in the bliss state, we automatically amplify the functions of the biological systems. Another example of molecular arrangements is the C60 carbon molecule on the left. And it has been tested on mice that when they introduced this specific C60 molecule, they were able to extend the lifespan of the mice by 90%, which is quite nice. And they also sell it in the form of olive oils for human consumption.
What report was it from 90%? Do you have a reference to that study? I've never heard it.
Yeah.
I've heard it as being 20 to 30%, but not 90%.
There are some reports on the internet. I'm sure you can Google it.
The fullerene, it's called Bucky after my friend Bucky, it is a phase conjugator, charge implosive, and nanocarbon like this is going to reinvent 80% of the industries on the planet, including propulsion and energy. So when you understand a buckyball, why carbon grows as that perfect fractal flower, you understand the entropy, source of energy, source of propulsion, 32 times stronger than steel by weight, and that's only the beginning. 80% of the industries on the planet are obsolete today. We can make that 99% pure. And guess what? We're doing it.
Yeah, that's why a gram of C60 is more expensive than the gram of gold.
But now we can do 100 tons a month, but nobody else knows it. Don't tell them.
All right. Yeah. And they also find these molecular arrangements in the cold space. Here. And yeah, once Leonardo da Vinci also drew that. And so all these science that we have been talking about are successfully being used in commercial products like the fractal water imploder that Winter successfully developed. You can see the differences between the seed germination and the growth effects. And yeah, you can see the details at theimploder.com.
This has been a short ad. Thank you, Tufan.
Okay, and on the TeraPhi system, I believe that those specific frequencies that we mentioned in the universal frequency cascade are also used in the TeraPhi.
And we'll be talking about that a lot.
Right. And also in Biontology, this is this biophoton therapy that I'm an expert on, are also, it's using the algorithm of golden ratio while giving the photonic signals, while transferring it through a circuit. So you can find more information on biontology.com/en. And thank you. All right. So one moment, everybody.
We do have 5 minutes time for questions.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And if you want to get the harmonizer, it's available here. You can find it. Dance books, Star Mother kits, and we have 2 Tauruses here if you want.
And Tufan is really bringing this to young people. I really encourage you to support him, his work, as he's bringing it to
Thank you.
the world. And we don't have the ambition to distribute the materials and make it simple like Tufan does. So thank you, Tufan,
Thank you.
for being here. We need you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
So you mentioned the relationship between, I think it was charge implosion or one of the concepts, and scalar. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. Well, when the charge goes through a vortex, it adds and multiplies constructively, and it adds inertia to its system. And at the center point, the transverse wave goes to longitudinal at the center and becomes compressional and incorrectly termed scalar based on Dan Winter's information.
At the 0 point.
Yes.
At the Planck threshold.
At the Planck.
Now, is that a plane wave after this transition?
It's, you know, they call it circularly polarized in RF, but by circularly polarized, they mean longitudinal, because the antenna that makes it is a spiral. So the term scalar confused a lot of people.
Yes.
It's not bad news, but in precise terms.
Right.
So thank you. And we'll be discussing that at length later in the day.
No, because that was an important point.
Oh, yeah.
They went
Sure.
over very quickly.
And we're going to talk about why that scalar longitudinal is the mechanism of all the healing fun stuff.
Yeah.
That's the subject later in the day. So
Then he's going to go more into
more
details.
soon than that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I think there was mentioned that the measurement tool
Yes.
is of the right proportion and scale. What's the difference between proportion and scale?
Everything.
Yeah.
What's
So
the correct scale?
this gives the proportion at the edges here.
Right.
Let's say A to B is golden ratio and B to C
Right.
is perfect golden ratio. So it's in coherence.
It's movable.
It's movable.
Yeah, that's
You can open it,
The proportions
close
aren't
it. The proportions doesn't change.
But the scale.
But the scale is the exact dimensions between the joints exactly fits into this frequency cascade that we were talking about. So it both contains the frequency cascade plus the measurement.
The ratio is correct, but the scale is all, the scale was derived from Planck and golden ratio. So when you make your sacred building, you use the British foot. All your ratios can be right, but if you don't choose the British foot, you're not going to implode charge as well. So scale and ratio. The scale starts with Planck. That's the new information. It defined the sacred because it defined all sacred units of measure.
As we saw it in the tablet of Shamash, it had both the proportions and the scale together.
The charge imploded. You tuned to Planck.
Right.
And that's called sacred.
There was a slide where you showed the octave relationship, and there was a 32-degree.
Tilt angle, yeah.
What is the move from one to the other? Is that a scalar move? Does it become the golden ratio with that 32-degree perspective change, like in,
Yeah.
as in the state?
Yeah, to make it clear, we are not categorizing anything good or evil. So because the universe is a dualistic universe, we need both sides. It's like yin and yang, minus and plus, rarefaction, compression. So as there are bioactive fields, life force supporting fields, there is opposite fields because they need each other. And it's same with the ratios, with the octal ratio and the golden ratio. These are the two edges of the system.
Tufan, I think his question was very simple. We apologize, we forgot to bring the big assembled star mother. That was my fault.
No, that's all good. No problem.
But if you look inside, you'll see that the angle that the cube tilts up slightly is 32 degrees, and then you rotate that on the new axis, blink 5 times, and you have the pent-dodeca. And so that changes from octave harmonics, charge, isolation charge, actually maximum destructive wave interference, the cube, the octave, to pent phi ratio. So that's a transition point from charge isolation, octave, to charge distribution, pent. And to visualize that, you're supposed to be looking at a cube embedding in a pent-dodeca.
Yeah. What I was saying is that you are moving from the one edge of the system to the other edge.
And can you give an example in nature of those two states?
Snowflake is hex, it's charge isolating. Every living protein seems to be pent, it's charge distributing. And so nature uses these very specific, and if you build your house, the hex part of the heart is great for secrets, and the pent part of the house is where you want to share with the neighbors. It works. I've seen it.
Thank you.
Charge isolation, charge distribution. Both are useful, different functions.
Right.
And the way one embeds in the other, that's the profound, yes. Sorry.
Thank you.
So the Sufi dancers, they're using the 32-degree tilt and the spin to get to bliss.
Well, that came from Flower of Life, but basically we know, and when we get later to the sacrocranial information, you'll see what that chin tilt does to the spine liquid pump. The phase angle. Patrick could have a day to speak about that. So yes.
Thank you.
The bliss pump.
Yes.
Tufan, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Could you describe a little about the octave ratio to the golden mean ratio in a musical term?
Yes, I'm not an expert on the musical frequencies.
Those are octaves, right?
Well, we could say very simply that all octaves are simply powers of 2. Very simple.
Right.
So every conventional musical is only octave. You think, well, gee, charge isolation, trouble. But if you take golden ratio music cascades, you get verify and what Paul is playing and what Patrick is playing. Later in the day, you will hear. And the details are at fractalfield.com/implosion sound. And we even overlay that and explain why the argument of 532 versus 420 hertz are actually answered if you understand the need for implosion sound.
So the golden mean ratios would be comparable to musical ratios?
Well, maybe fifths?
No.
Well, in our language, everything is musical ratio. Physics is only a name for musical ratios of waves. So we haven't stopped talking about music here.
Whether it sounds musical is another factor.
Yeah, but so we'll be playing golden ratio sounds a lot today for sure, and they can be very disturbing because implosion, you need to be in the right place and ready. And frankly, if you did your bliss in a metal room, it's going to be a bit, bad for your aura. So there's some places you don't want to implode. but this is Tufan's talking.
In a metal building?
No, please, I didn't mean to take over.
Any final questions for Tufan?
Yeah. Thank you, Tufan. That was
You're welcome. Thank you.